What's up, YouTube? Zero here, and today I have an absolutely amazing Incineroar EX and Torkoal deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build that you can see on the left hand side of the screen. I'll talk about each of these cards individually, and I'll talk about why this deck works really well and why you should definitely check it out. Before I get into it, I do want to say if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Without further ado, let's talk about this deck. Incineroar EX is an absolutely phenomenal card, phenomenal Pokemon. Really cool Pokemon in general. It's a buff cat. Who does not like an extremely muscular cat? But outside of that, Incineroar has a couple of tricks, and with the release of How, has even more tricks up its sleeve. So that's where I'm gonna start in this deck. So Incineroar EX has two moves. The first is Fire Fang for just 1 fire energy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned on top of 30 damage. So 30 damage plus a burn is 50 damage for just 1 fire energy, and of course you have a possibility of keeping your opponent burned so you can deal more damage, but 50 energy for 1 fire energy is pretty insane and really nice, and can lead up into Incineroar EX's next move, which is Scar Charge Smash. Scar Charge Smash is 3 energy, 2 fire, 1 colorless. We're running a fire energy deck, so it doesn't matter if it's fire energy or colorless energy. It is for 3 energy. Scar Charge Smash deals 80 damage. However, if Incineroar EX has damage on it, the attack does 60 more damage. So if Incineroar EX has any form of damage, it's going to deal 140 damage with Scar Charge Smash, which is really awesome. Can one-hit KO a lot of different Pokemon in the meta and in the game. So that's really awesome. I absolutely love Incineroar EX. It's been one of my favorite Pokemon in Pokemon TCG since it was introduced, one of my go-to Pokemon. It is a very reliable Pokemon in general, especially right now with the introduction of How, which I will talk about in a little bit. But if you're grinding for Incineroar EX, you're going to want to look in the Celestial Guardian Solgaleo pack. So take a look in there so you can find Incineroar EX. Of course, you need to evolve into Incineroar EX, so there's going to be a Litten, 2 Littens in this deck, 1 Torkoal, and then 2 rare candies. Let's talk about all of those cards. Pretty basic. Torkoal, I'm only having 1 in this deck. Just 2 rare candies and 1 Torkoal are enough to try and get that evolution into Incineroar. But Torkoal, for 1 fire energy, Heat Tackle. 40 damage, but also does 10 damage to itself. That's actually not the worst in the world. If you are dealing damage to yourself, you're actually setting up Incineroar's Scar Charge Smash. So I do like Torkoal with its Heat Tackle, so I can set up a Scar Charge Smash with the evolution. Then, of course, Litten, Heat Tackle for 1 fire energy, deals 30 damage, also doing 10 damage to itself. Same concept as Torkoal. If you're dealing damage to yourself, you're setting up the Scar Charge Smash, which is really nice. 10 damage isn't the end of the world with Incineroar, because Incineroar does have 180 HP, which is really nice. So 10 damage isn't going to be the end of the world, but it's going to set up a Scar Charge Smash, which is going to be really nice. This Litten you can find in the Celestial Guardian Solgaleo packs, and the same thing with the Torkoal. Both are going to be found, or all 3 in this evolution chain are going to be found in the Celestial Guardians Solgaleo packs. So be on the lookout for this evolution line of Incineroar EX in those packs. Next, I'm going to talk about Rare Candy because I did mention it. Rare Candy is absolutely awesome. If you've watched my videos before, an extremely important card for any stage 2 type Pokemon. You already know what it does if you've been playing the game a while. Of course, one of the most important cards in the game if you have any stage 2 Pokemon, because it makes it a lot quicker to evolve into those stage 2 Pokemon. So Rare Candy, if you've had Layton on the field for at least one turn, and you have a Rare Candy and the Incineroar EX in your hand, you can skip the stage 1, which in this case is Torkoal, and evolve right into Incineroar. This is actually really nice because Incineroar does have a move already discussed for 1 fire energy. So evolving right into Incineroar, you're probably going to have a heat tackle already done, but if you don't, you can still attack with Incineroar's Fire Fang. You're going to deal that 30 damage and burn your opponent. So Rare Candy is phenomenal when combined with Layton to get to Incineroar EX. And Rare Candy is going to be found in either of the Celestial Guardians packs, the Solgaleo or the Lunala. So fantastic card to have with Incineroar. There are actually a lot of players that have an Incineroar EX only deck. That's how good Incineroar EX is. You can get to Incineroar EX fairly quickly, especially with Rare Candy, and you can start dealing a lot of damage, both with Fire Fang and the Scar Charge Smash. Of course, Fire Fang, you're burning your opponent, you're dealing 50, if not more. If it does continue to burn your opponent's unlucky and doesn't get the coin flip. Once you get to Scar Charge Smash, if you have a little bit of damage, dealing 140 damage is absolutely awesome. And then you combine with How, and you deal even more damage. I'm going to talk about How in a sec, and then I'm going to talk about why I have Torkoal in this deck. So How, I have 2 of them, and it's absolutely epic for not just Incineroar EX, but all of these cards. During this turn, attacks used by your Decidueye EX, Incineroar EX, or Primarina EX do plus 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So this is absolutely phenomenal, not just when combined with Scar Charge Smash, but also Fire Fang. So let's talk about both of these. If you play How, and you're dealing Fire Fang deals 30. Plus 20 from burn. Of course, if your opponent does get burned, there are a couple of Pokemon in the game that are going to avoid this, or Choreo will avoid any damage from an EX Pokemon, and then Arceus doesn't get status conditioned. But outside of those, as of I'm making this video right now, every other Pokemon takes that fire damage, so you're dealing 30 plus the 20 from the fire damage, plus an extra 30. So you can deal 80 damage for 1 energy. That's absolutely phenomenal. And if you're facing a Pokemon that's not fully evolved, you have a potential to 1-hit KO it. But if we move to Scar Charge Smash and Incineroar EX has a little bit of damage on itself, then How is going to help Incineroar EX deal 170 damage. That is phenomenal and can 1-hit KO the majority of Pokemon in the game. Of course, it won't 1-hit KO every Pokemon in the game. Incineroar EX, of course, has 180 HP. So 180 HP, you won't 1-hit KO. But there are a lot of Pokemon, a lot of widely used Pokemon that are going to be 1-hit KO by 170 damage. So it's absolutely phenomenal. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of players are running a Soul Incineroar EX deck. So that's awesome that this Pokemon is that good and people are that confident in running this Pokemon that they only choose to run a deck with Incineroar EX. Now I'm going to move on to Torkoal, and I'm going to mention why I put Torkoal with Incineroar EX. There are 2 reasons. 1, Torkoal is a fairly decent Pokemon. It's a basic 100 HP, and for 2 fire energy, Flamethrower is 70 damage. Of course, there's a drawback with this. You have to discard a fire energy from this Pokemon after utilizing Flamethrower. However, You can get Torkoal going pretty quickly, only 2 fire energy for Flamethrower, dealing 70 damage. This can get through a lot of Pokemon in the game before they're able to evolve into their full potential, so that's awesome. You always want to try and run through your opponent before your opponent's able to maximize their Pokemon, and by that I mean before they're able to evolve to their full potential, because every deck you're trying to get to your final evolution. You're trying to implement your strategy. If you have a Pokemon that can take out the basics, the stage 1s that aren't fully evolved, you're going to be doing something right. You're slowing your opponent down. You're stopping your opponent in their tracks. So Torkoal is really good at this. Only 2 energy, 70 damage, so you can really start running through your opponent quickly. So that's the first reason I have Torkoal in this deck, because if I get Torkoal first, I could put it in an active spot and really start dealing a lot of damage pretty quickly. The second reason I have Torkoal in this deck is because of Oricorio that I mentioned earlier. Oricorio does not take any damage from Pokemon EX. So that means it's not going to take any damage from an Incineroar EX. If you run an Incineroar EX only deck, of course you're going to have the evolution line, but that means you're going to be relying on Linton and Torkoal to do your damage to Oricorio. Oricorio has base 70 HP. If an opponent puts Giant Cape on it, it's now 90 HP. So Torkoal is going to be dealing 40 damage, or Linton is going to be dealing 30 damage. This really isn't enough, considering I don't have any healing in this deck. Perhaps you want to get rid of Torkoal and get some healing in this deck if you were just running an Incineroar EX deck, but it's going to be very slow to take out that Oricorio, and knowing Oricorio decks, especially since I've built some of them, typically Oricorio decks have healing involved, so you can keep your Oricorio alive. Now, if you have Torkoal and it's dealing 70 damage to an Oricorio that has a base HP of 70, if your opponent doesn't have a cape, you're going to take it out in 1 hit. If it does have a cape, it's probably only going to be a 2-hit KO, so it's not going to be insanely hard to deal with if you have Torkoal. However, of course, if you don't have Torkoal, if you opt to just go with Incineroar EX deck, it's going to be extremely hard to take out Oricorio. So that's 2 reasons why I opt for Torkoal in this deck. 1, you can potentially take out a lot of Pokemon really quickly with Torkoal, and it's nice to counter Oricorio decks. Torkoal can take out Oricorio fairly easily. That's why I have it in this deck. But it's a really nice pairing for Incineroar EX, so don't discount it. Torkoal can be found in the EV Grove packs, and the same with How. You can find How in the EV Grove packs. Next, let's talk about some of the basics. Pokeball, you draw a basic Pokemon from your deck to your hand, and Professor's Research, you draw 2 cards. Always important to draw as many cards as possible so you can implement your strategy. Next, 2 cards that can get to Pokemon on the bench. I always mention this in the majority of my videos. I typically have these cards stashed away because they are so important. Sabrina, I have 2 of them. You switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. Your opponent gets to choose what Pokemon on the bench they get to put in that active slot. But Sabrina is so important to disrupt your opponent's strategy or get a Pokemon out of that active slot that you just don't want to deal with. Perhaps they have a tool on them that you don't want to deal with. Perhaps they're extremely powerful. You want to get to a Pokemon on the bench that's not as powerful or weakened that you can easily take out. Sabrina is absolutely awesome. It is one of the best cards in the game. I recommend it so often, but it is so good. It's been around for so long and it's not going anywhere. Sabrina can be found in the Genetic Apex Charizard packs. Cyrus, along the same lines of Sabrina, a great card. You can switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage on it to the active slot. So if you've damaged a Pokemon, your opponent tries to retreat it, you can take that Pokemon, put it right back into the active slot, so you can either finish it off or deal more damage to it. An absolutely awesome card. I do have one of them in the deck. And Cyrus is going to be found in the Space Time Smackdown Palkia packs. Last but not least, a means of keeping Incineroar alive, I'm throwing Lily into this deck. So Lily heals 60 damage from one of your Stage 2 Pokemon. Incineroar EX is a Stage 2 Pokemon. Lily is going to heal up Incineroar for 60 HP. That's absolutely awesome. It's going to increase the survivability of Incineroar tenfold. It's going to keep it alive. It's going to allow you to continue to attack your opponents with Incineroar rather than having to build up Pokemon on the bench. You can have Incineroar in that active slot for a little bit longer. And of course, being an EX Pokemon, you don't want your EX Pokemon to go down because you give up 2 points when your EX Pokemon go down. So Lily is going to help Incineroar stay alive as long as possible and deal as much damage to your opponents as possible. So that's why I love Lily here. It's a phenomenal card to have, especially for EX Pokemon that deal a lot of damage that your deck is centered around, because Lily can keep them alive a lot longer. Lily is going to be found in the Celestial Guardians Solgaleo packs, just like Incineroar and its evolution line. So that's the deck. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's a great deck to try out. I've loved this deck. I love Incineroar in general because it is a great Pokemon to throw into a lot of fire decks. It can deal a lot of damage, whether you're just equipping one energy and dealing Fire Fang to your opponents, coupled with how you're dealing 80 damage. Or you got Scar Charge Smash, you have a little bit of damage on your Incineroar. Add how you're dealing 170 damage. It's absolutely phenomenal to have. Torkoal is a great partner for Incineroar because it can either start quick. If you do start with Torkoal, it can start quick, damage your opponent's lesser Pokemon, I want to say, or Pokemon that aren't as strong. Torkoal can go out there and damage them or even finish them off with one hit. And it can also deal with those pesky Oricorio decks that Incineroar EX does not like. So it's a great pairing of these two. Again, I have a couple of my staples in the majority of my decks, Sabrina and Cyrus, to get to some Pokemon on the bench that I may want to get to, or at least disrupt my opponent's strategy, because my opponent isn't going to expect it. They have a Pokemon in that active slot with a lot of energy on it. I can push them out of that active slot. The majority of players right now are not running Leaf. They're not running X-Speed. Some people are, but most aren't, because there are so many great cards in the game and you're limited to 20. So most people are going to have to find a way of getting the Pokemon you just pushed into that active slot back out, because they don't want them there. Last but most certainly not least, Lily is there to keep Incineroar alive. You don't want to drop 2 points, and Incineroar is going to be the damage dealer. It's going to be dealing a ton of damage to your opponent, so you want to keep your damage dealer alive as long as possible. Let me know what you think of this deck in the comments section. Are you running an Incineroar EX deck that's similar to this deck, or is yours completely different? Let me know what you're pairing with Incineroar EX is. Are there any Pokemon that you want to see a deck that's centered around? Let me know in the comment section and I'll put one together for you. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, again, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and until next time, peace.